Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling a topic today that's probably crossed everyone's mind at some point.
Yeah.
Workplace romance.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one.
And to really get under the skin of this, common experience, we've gathered quite a mix of perspectives.
Exactly. We've got firsthand accounts from fashion journal readers, people who've actually been there.
Right.
Then there's a list of spicy office romance novels from Jeeves Reads Romance, so we can look at the fictional side too.
And the fiction is always revealing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And finally, some pretty eye-opening anonymous stories of actual office affairs from BuzzFeed. Some of these are quite shocking, honestly.
Okay, so quite the range.
Hi.
Our goal for you today, listening in, is really to go beyond just the usual office gossip.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to get a richer understanding of these workplace relationships. Look at the potential for real connection, but also explore the complexities, the downsides too.
The risks, definitely.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
So maybe starting with just how common this is, it's pretty widespread.
Yeah.
The fashion journal piece we looked at, it mentioned a statistic that 13% of Australians actually met their partners at work.
13%. That's significant.
It really is. It puts it right up there with meeting through friends or even online dating now.
Wow. It really makes you think about, well, just the sheer amount of time we spend at work, doesn't it?
Totally. Often it's more waking hours with colleagues than with our own families or partners.
So it seems almost inevitable, or at least not surprising that connections form.
Right. Natural in a way. Like Talia mentioned in her fashion journal story, during lockdown especially, work became this huge social outlet.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
And she said it created this closer environment where, a vibe definitely emerged.
Ah, vibe. I like that.
Yeah. And beyond just being in the same space, there's that sexy secret thing Ashura mentioned in her story.
Ooh, yes. The thrill.
That initial stage, keeping it under wraps. It can feel exciting, a bit clandestine.
The classic appeal of the forbidden, even if it's just, frowned upon rather than strictly forbidden sometimes.
Exactly. And Talia also mentioned something else powerful, that shared understanding of work life.
Explain that.
Well, when you're both dealing with the same boss, the same projects, the same office politics,
Right, the same stresses.
there's this built-in understanding. You don't have to explain the context. They
Yeah.
just get it. And that can be really attractive.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. A kind of shortcut to intimacy almost.
That shared context is huge. And if we look at the fiction side, the Jeeves Reads Romance list. The intro talks about the potential for extreme levels of sexual tension in workplace romances.
Extreme levels. Okay.
Yeah, the close quarters, working on stuff together, maybe even arguing sometimes. It can all feed into that spark.
Okay, so prevalence is clear, the appeal, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But what actually happens? What does it look like in real life?
Well, that's where the fashion journal stories are so interesting. They show this whole spectrum. You've got these really heartwarming success stories.
Yeah, let's start there. Give us some hope.
Okay. So Ashura's story started as the super sexy secret at a cafe she worked at.
Right.
5 years later, they're engaged, own a dog, own an apartment together. Sounds pretty good, right?
Sounds amazing.
But even she said, looking back, it was super risky. That risk element keeps coming up.
Seems to be a theme. What else?
Talia's story, again, her lockdown romance in manufacturing, it blossomed, they moved in together, and they're still going strong even though she doesn't work there anymore.
Okay, so it can outlast the job itself.
Definitely. And she made a great point about how meeting at work gave her insight into each other's values.
That's interesting. How so?
Like seeing how someone handles stress, how they treat colleagues, their work ethic. It reveals character, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. You see a different side, maybe a more functional side than just on a date.
Precisely. Then there's Emily. Met her partner casually at McDonald's when they were younger.
Wow, okay.
Now, over a decade later, married 5 years, successful careers, they've traveled, own homes, and they're expecting a baby.
That's incredible. From Macus to married life, it shows it can start anywhere.
Totally. And Gwen's story is really sweet, too. Met a traveler while working at a hostel.
Okay.
They had to navigate long distance during the pandemic, which must have been tough.
Oh, brutal.
But they managed it, now living together, celebrating 5 years. She called it an unconventional way to meet, highlighting that rare connection. Makes you think about fate a bit.
Yeah, or just grabbing an opportunity when you feel that spark, even in an unusual setting.
And all his experience is interesting because it started as friendship, they worked together, became good friends, and then it just naturally turned into romance.
So that foundation was already there.
Exactly. And they moved in together really quickly after making it official, still super happy. It suggests maybe that friendship base smooths the path.
Makes sense. Less initial awkwardness, maybe.
Could be. Martine's story met a colleague who transferred into her department. They kept it quiet at first.
The secret again.
Yep. Now they're married, but they don't work together anymore. And she mentioned this funny practical thing.
What's that?
They can't vent about work to each other in the same way now because they don't have that shared context anymore.
Ah, that's actually a really good point. Shows how intertwined things get.
Totally. And Vicky's story involved her boss, though not the big boss.
Okay, a bit more complicated.
Yeah, it actually led to her resigning so she could go traveling. But they got back together afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Now it's 15 years later, married with kids. Her story really brought up how workplace policies can directly affect these things. She had to make a big choice.
A massive choice. Leave your job for a potential relationship. That's commitment.
For sure. And Rory's story is kind of funny. She worked with this guy for 8 years, barely spoke.
8 years.
Yeah. Then, bam, Christmas party. They connect.
The magic of the office Christmas party.
Apparently. She eventually left the firm, but they got together and are now living together. She found it amazing finding love in that suit and tie world, totally unexpected.
It shows you never know, right?
Right. And August's story started as friendship. He was with someone else, then they broke up, and his friendship with his colleague deepened into romance.
Ah, okay. Timing.
Yeah. Now they live together, have a puppy, planning kids. He described it as feeling like finding his soulmate.
That's lovely. It's
Yeah.
interesting how many start as friendships.
It really is. And one more from BuzzFeed, actually, that fits the success pattern. A teacher and an aide.
Okay.
Connected over shared beliefs, both ended up going through divorces around the same time, got together, and now, 33 years later, 9 grandkids.
33 years. That's amazing.
And they talked about finding that deep connection they felt was missing in their previous marriages. So it seems these workplace connections can be incredibly profound and lasting.
Okay, those are genuinely heartwarming.
Mm.
Shows it can absolutely work out beautifully.
Yeah.
But I sense a but coming.
Well, yeah. As we said, it's spectrum. The Fashion Journal also shared stories that were more complex
Right.
or had negative outcomes.
Right. The flip side. What makes it difficult?
Often it seems to boil down to the struggle of mixing the professional and the personal, like Frankie's story.
What happened that?
Instant spark with a senior colleague. Sounds exciting, right? And she actually benefited initially, learned a lot from him.
Okay, some perks.
But the power dynamic, their different roles, it led to arguments. And then she moved cities for his job.
Oh, dear.
And now she described herself as incredibly miserable and somewhat resentful. That power imbalance really poisoned it.
Oof. Resentment. That's a tough one. It really shows how power, even if not direct boss-employee, can mess things up.
Definitely. Liliana's story highlights timing again. She worked with her partner for 6 whole years in retail. 6 years.
And nothing happened.
Nope. Only after she left the job did they connect romantically. Now they've been together 3 years, but interestingly, they live separately.
So maybe the workplace itself was a barrier for them.
It kind of suggests that, doesn't it? Indy's story, she worked in hospitality, got into a relationship with a coworker.
Okay. Hospitality can be intense.
Yeah, and navigating different shifts was tough. But her main advice was crucial. Be prepared to walk away from the job at some point.
Wow. That's stark.
Yeah.
Basically, prioritize the relationship over the job if it comes down to it.
Or at least be ready for that possibility. It shows the potential conflict, the sacrifices you might face.
That's a heavy consideration.
Then there's Yuka, an intern who got involved with the operations manager.
Okay. Clear power difference there.
Big time. She described agonizing months of longing before they got together, and she actually changed jobs soon after. Even though it worked out for them eventually, that initial imbalance caused a lot of angst.
Yeah, that agonizing longing sounds rough, especially when you have to see them every day professionally.
Exactly. And Amina's story is another reminder that it's not always immediate. She knew her manager from a previous workplace, but they only got together after she'd left her current job where he was her manager. So removing that direct professional hierarchy seemed necessary for them.
Interesting. The context really matters.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the more complex, maybe slightly cautionary tales. But then there are the affairs.
Ah, yes. The BuzzFeed anecdotes. This is where things get intense and often messy.
Understatement of the year, probably.
Yeah,
These really show the potential for serious fallout, right? Personally and professionally.
absolutely. Like the affair with the late night show host, much older, married man.
Classic scenario, almost.
Yeah. She said the sex was too hot to let go. It ended when they both left their jobs, but years later, she still thinks about seeking him out.
Wow. That shows the lasting emotional pull, even when it's complicated and maybe unethical.
Definitely. Then there was the minivan and bathroom affair.
Oh my. Sounds descriptive.
It was. Two married colleagues. A 5-year affair that escalated, lots of close calls.
Stress.
You'd think. But the kicker. It ended. And a decade later, one of them tragically lost their spouse. And they admitted they still miss the coworker more.
Oh, that is heartbreaking and speaks volumes about the depth, however illicit, of that connection.
It really does. Shows the profound, sometimes destructive emotional bonds.
What else? There were dealership stories, right? Seems like a hotbed.
Apparently, one involved a boss who left his wife for a coworker. Then he got fired for cheating with another coworker.
Oh, come on.
And apparently he and the first coworker are still sneaking around even though there's zero trust. It just shows these patterns can repeat.
Wow. It paints a pretty bleak picture of trust and integrity in that case.
Yeah. But then a slight twist. Another story. Intern and an older divorced man began with that power imbalance.
Okay.
It fizzled.
Okay.
But 10 years later, they reconnected at a convention and are apparently still together now.
Really? So time and changed circumstances can alter the outcome, even from a tricky start.
It seems so sometimes. But contrast that with the intern and the married politician. Brief hookups. She regretted it because he was married. They don't speak anymore. Much more common outcome, probably. Fleeting, ethically dubious, no lasting connection.
Right. More what you might expect.
And then there was just the blatant rule breaking, the flirty coworker caught having sex in the stockroom, fired on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. Some lines you just don't cross. That's less about romance, more about basic workplace conduct.
Totally. The TA and the older divorced professor hooked up after hours. She described it as best sex ever,
Okay.
but she regrets it didn't continue. Why? He passed away. A different kind of ending, dictated by external events.
Gosh, yeah. That's sad and unresolved in a different way.
But maybe the most devastating story, charming married coworker convinces a woman to leave her job.
Yeah. Red flag, maybe.
Big time. They have sex while his family is away on holiday. His wife finds out.
Disaster.
She gets fired, then finds out she's pregnant. He denies paternity.
Oh my God. That is horrific. That's careers ruined, lives turned upside down. A truly awful outcome.
Exactly. A stark, stark warning.
Were there others? It feels like we're covering a lot of ground here.
Just a few more really illustrative ones. The post office with multiple affairs going on, like it was part of the culture, led to divorces, complications, heartbreak all around. Shows how it can become almost normalized in certain environments.
A toxic environment sounds like.
Yeah. And another dealership, the owner bringing escorts to the office, the sales manager having affairs, getting involved in threesomes, just extreme breaches of professional conduct.
Okay, that's beyond workplace romance into something else entirely. Seriously unprofessional.
Definitely. Then there was the one about unrequited feelings, like a friends with benefits situation, where one person developed strong feelings for a coworker who had a girlfriend.
Awkward.
Yeah, felt led on, got rejected hurtfully. Cautionary tale about reading signals, maybe, assuming flirtation means more.
Absolutely. Misinterpretations happen easily.
The evening manager affair, older, married guy, younger, inexperienced coworker, lasted a few months, fizzled out. Again, highlights that power imbalance and how these things can just be temporary for one person.
Exploitative, potentially?
Could be. And one last boss at a car dealership, married, long affair. Turns out he had multiple other girlfriends, drug issues. Both ended up leaving the dealership eventually. Betrayal, lack of professionalism, the whole package.
Good grief. It's like a soap opera, but with real jobs and lives at stake.
Pretty much. Okay, so that's the messy real-life affair side. Quite a journey.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've seen the real-life roller coaster, the good, the bad, the ugly. Let's switch gears slightly to the fictional world.
Right. The Jeeves Reads Romance lists the spicy office romance books.
Yeah. What kind of tropes, what themes pop up again and again in these stories? And what does that maybe tell us about our, fantasies or expectations around this?
Well, interestingly, a super common one is enemies to lovers.
Ah, the classic. Pride and Prejudice at the water cooler.
Kind of maybe that tension, the close proximity, the potential for conflict at work. It just lends itself really well to that dynamic in fiction. Initial friction masking attraction.
Understands us.
Billionaire romances often use a workplace setting, often with a power imbalance, obviously, though we're focusing more on coworkers today.
Right. We noted the boss-employee thing is popular, but yeah, let's stick to colleagues for now. But that forbidden element, even if it's just colleagues who shouldn't,
Yeah.
that definitely adds spice in fiction.
Oh, yeah. Raises the stakes, secret meetings, stolen
All
glances.
that good stuff.
Totally. Fake relationships is another one that pops up in workplace settings.
Like pretend to be a couple for the office party.
Exactly. Or for promotion or whatever the plot requires. And of course, the forced proximity and pretending often leads to real feelings. It explores that idea of acting a role until it becomes real.
And rivals romance.
Yeah, colleagues competing for the same project or client, built-in conflicts, sparks fly, suggests competition can fuel attraction, maybe.
Or at least makes for good drama. The blog post mentioned bickering that feels like banter, too.
Yes, that witty back and forth. It's often how characters test the waters, show interest playfully in these books.
And opposites attract, of course. The organized one and the chaotic one sharing an office.
Exactly. A romance staple works well in the office setting. Different skills, different personalities complementing each other, professionally and personally.
So while the Jeeves list had some boss scenarios, you mentioned a Reddit thread, too.
Yeah, someone specifically asked for spicy coworker romances, no hierarchy, and the list was amazing. So many different jobs.
Like what?
Magazine editors, like in Lauren Lane's books. People in a super competitive workplace entangled. Forced proximity and locked box. Tattoo artists, PR reps and frequency of attraction, travel site workers and meet, hate, love, even surgeons in the worst sky.
Wow, okay. So it's not just corporate offices. And you said spicy.
Oh, yeah. The recommendations range from, like, closed-door romance to very explicit. So the whole spectrum of intimacy gets explored in these fictional takes.
What do you think these fictional stories do? Why are they popular?
Well, they often amplify the inherent tensions, don't they? The
Mm.
competition, keeping up appearances, the risk of gossip, career impact.
Right, they dial it up to 11.
Exactly. They let us explore all the what-ifs, the potential drama, the high stakes, but, safely. From our
A
armchairs.
safe space to
Ah.
explore the danger zone.
Oh.
Okay. So bringing it all together now, the real stories, good and bad, the fictional tropes, what are the key things for people to think about if you're navigating this or even just considering it? What are the practical takeaways?
Okay, number one, I'd say, is being really aware of power dynamics. Even if you're technically coworkers.
How so?
Well, is one person more senior, been there longer, has more informal influence? Even subtle differences can create an imbalance that complicates things, like in Frankie's story.
Right, good point. It's not always about official titles.
Definitely not. And number two, know your workplace policies, seriously.
Boring, but important.
Super important. Lots of companies have rules about relationships between colleagues, especially reporting relationships. Ignoring them can cost you your job. Remember, Vicky had to resign initially.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. What else?
Consent and clear communication. Obvious, maybe, but vital.
Can't overstate it.
What feels like harmless flirting to you might be really uncomfortable or even feel like harassment to someone else. You have to be clear, honest, and respectful about intentions and boundaries.
Absolutely. And privacy, office gossip.
Huge challenge. Things rarely stay secret in an office for long. You have to be prepared for people to know, to talk. It can affect your reputation, how people treat you.
Yeah, the rumor mill.
Yeah.
And actually working with your partner, or worse, your ex.
Oh, God, yeah. Many of the fashion journal people mention this. It takes a lot of maturity. Imagine performance reviews or disagreements about work and breaking up. Nightmare scenario if you still share a desk.
Requires serious compartmentalization skills.
Big time. Also, we saw relationships changing or starting after someone leaves the job, like Liliana or Rory.
Right, so the dynamic can totally shift once you're not colleagues anymore.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Exactly. And look, the affair stories from BuzzFeed, they just hammer home the extra layer of complexity and potential for serious harm when someone involved is married or committed.
Yeah. The personal and professional risks just skyrocket then for everyone involved.
Totally. So ultimately, it's about weighing things up, isn't it? That potential for real connection versus all these risks and challenges we've talked about.
There's no single right answer.
Nope. Different people, different workplaces, different levels of risk tolerance, very individual.
Okay. So let's try and sum up this deep dive then. Workplace romance.
Oh.
It's complicated.
That's the word.
It absolutely holds the potential for real, lasting love. We saw some beautiful examples of that.
Definitely.
But it also comes loaded with significant challenges, potential pitfalls, serious risks sometimes.
And looking at both the real stories and the fictional ones gives us, hopefully, some valuable insights into how to navigate that tricky territory, or maybe whether to enter it at all.
Right. Which leads us to a final thought for you listening, something to mull over.
Considering how much of our lives we pour into work, hours and energy, is it actually realistic, or even desirable maybe, to try and keep our professional and personal lives totally separate?
Especially when genuine human connections clearly do form in these spaces.
So the question becomes, what kind of boundaries can we, as individuals and maybe workplaces too, reasonably set up? How do we navigate these complex situations responsibly, thoughtfully?
Yeah. How do we manage the human element within the professional structure? Definitely something to think about as you go about your day.